The following broadcast is brought to you by Sons of God International and Freedom Fellowship Church. Hello, and welcome to the prophetic voice of our time, where we focus on the voice of prophecy, which is the testimony of Jesus Christ. Our host, Christina Sasso, is a senior pastor at Freedom Fellowship Church. Let's hear what she has to say to the body of Christ.
Hello, thank you for tuning in. This is James Sasso with Sons of God International and Freedom Fellowship Church, and you are listening to the prophetic voice of our time. Before we begin and get into the message, I would just like to say a quick reminder that we are still fundraising for our partners and churches in the Philippines due to the earthquake that they had suffered from recently. If you would like to help that cause, you can donate at sogmi.org. Now, today we have a special guest who is going to be sharing a message with us today that lines up with what we've been learning about faith and implementation. This is Paula Nations. She is a minister and teacher who operates strongly in the gift of prophecy. She has also recently published 2 children's books titled A Birthday Cake Catastrophe and Lester Couldn't Crow. Now, without any further ado, let's listen in.
Thank you for tuning in. It is my pleasure to be with you today. Before we close today, my hope is that you know and understand God's authorized tools and God's authorized protocol to accomplish His word and His will on the face of the earth. I know you've seen it. I've seen it. Someone uses a hammer when they should use a screwdriver. Or maybe they use a steak knife when they should use a grater. In either case, they are using the wrong tool, but still expect the desired result. As believers, we have been given tools to accomplish the work that God has put before us. The promises of God and faith, 2 powerful tools we have available to us to bring the will of God into the earth and into our lives. Along the way, often because of religious teaching, things get a little confused. And no longer do we believe that the promise of God and that faith are enough. We believe there is more required. More effort, more time, more serving, more giving, something more to get the results, to make things happen. Somehow, all the doing crowds out the promises of God. The tools we have been given to move the immovable. Maybe, just maybe, it's because tradition, or maybe because these religious teachings seem more spiritual or seem more modern. But whatever the reason, religious teachings and traditions have crept into and sometimes even have replaced the tools that God has given us, the tools that He has given us to move the immovable. Let's examine some common teachings. Let's see if these teachings promote God's promises and faith. Remember, these are the tools we have been authorized by God to establish the will of God here on earth and to move the immovable. Or do these teachings require something else? Something more from a brother or sister? Requirements that God has never authorized. You know you're a born-again believer, but something isn't right in your relationship with God. You can feel it. You're stuck, but you can't figure it out. You know something's wrong. So you seek counsel. You ask your pastor, or perhaps an elder of your church. Their answer does not bring any direction or any comfort. They conclude that you must be lacking in your commitment to God. You're not praying enough. Maybe you haven't been giving enough or serving enough. Do you hear the underlying message in this line of thinking? The message is all about doing. Doing is an obligation, a debt, a requirement for an answer from God. This thinking says that the promises of God and faith are not enough. This thinking creates obligation. An obligation always undermines faith. An undermined faith is not faith, but doubt, dressed up to look like faith. Let's pause and consider. Faith is anchored in God's promise. The two, faith and the promises of God, or God promises and faith, are tied together. Any promise of God is pleasant poetry and doesn't move anything, doesn't create anything on earth without faith. Faith without the promise is not faith, and the promise without the faith is just nice poetry. God can only honor that which is rooted in His Word. Faith is unwavering confidence in the promise of God. God's promise is a double guarantee. God's character and God's Word are rolled up into His promise. God, who cannot lie, creates a promise that cannot be broken. That creates unwavering confidence in the promises of God. So when faith is anchored in God's promises, when these two are tied together, there is the God-authorized plan to create change on the earth. This is the plan to move the immovable. Now, let's rewind this same scenario and let's apply the promise of God and faith. Remember, there was something wrong in the relationship with God. Something was stuck, but you couldn't figure it out. Ask Him. Go before Him and ask. And then expect an answer. That expectation is faith. When you ask a question of a partner, of a friend or a coworker, you would expect an answer. And so it is with God. When you ask, you can expect an answer. Jeremiah 33 verse 3 says, "Call to me and I will answer you, and I will tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." Right there. Call to me and I will answer you. That's a promise. And He will tell you things you didn't know. Psalm 3:4. I cried aloud to the Lord, and He answered me from His holy hill. Psalm 120, verse 1. I call on the Lord in my distress, and He answers me. Look at every one of these verses. What is required? Call to me. Call to the Lord. Ask Him. Reach out to Him. Talk to Him. And expect Him to answer. That's it. That's the promise, because the promise is if you call, He'll answer. And the faith part is to expect that He will answer, that He'll be as good as His word. So if you call, He's going to answer. That is the promise of God tied to faith. He makes no other requirements. Just call and be confident that He will answer. He will give correction. He will give guidance. He will give comfort. And the answer that He gives is going to be true and trustworthy. It will go and it will be the kind of answer that will transform your life. You can feel confident in that answer, not more frustrated or perplexed. Let's look at another church tradition. And this is using verse Hebrews 10:25 that says, "Do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together." This verse has been twisted and the intent has been lost. How many times has this verse been used to pressure or to coerce people into a building for a service, for a meeting, for a workday? The implication is that if you're not there every time the church doors open, it means you're backslidden. Your relationship with God is lacking. It means you're on shaky ground. You better be careful, because you're not attending every time the church doors open. Well, what happens if you have to work? Or maybe you no longer feel safe driving at night. Where does that leave you? The message is that unless you are in attendance every time the doors open, you're not among God's most favored one. Now let's take this scenario apart and let's examine it. And let's apply what we've already learned, which is the call, because that's what we've been told to do. Call on the Lord and He will give us an answer. And we're calling to ask, what is the promise? What is your word in this situation? And then from that word, we will apply our faith. And we will ask the Lord, what is your word about this situation? Lord, what is your truth about my heart in this situation? What do you, Lord, have to say about this? And He will answer you because, as we read earlier, this is what He has promised. And He has promised that if we call, He will answer. Now, here's an important point. The condition of the heart in every situation is more valuable to God than the circumstance of the situation. Let me read that again because that's important. The condition of the heart, your heart, in every situation is more valuable to God than the circumstance of the situation. If in this case you became angry or bitter because of the pressure or because of judgment of others, expect that the answer that He gives you would first address your heart. After the heart gives up its anger, its bitterness, its unforgiveness, then He can talk about the concerns of the situation. The promise that I saw with this situation comes from Matthew 11:28 and 29. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. This promise of God is for those who are worn out and tired. He promises to give rest, but listen to how that rest occurs. He says to come to Him, and He says to take His yoke. His yoke is that union with Him, because His yoke is easy and light. And that from that you are to learn, to change your mind, to be transformed, to understand that He is gentle and humble in your heart, and that you find rest for your soul. He gives rest for the soul because it's no longer tormented. There's confidence. There's peace. The questioning doubt of uncertainty about your position in Jesus, about doing enough, about are you accepted or are you acceptable, that torment is no more. Here He promises if you come and connect yourself to Him, that the yoke to work alongside of Him is easy and light, and that you will learn His ways and you will have rest. This is a beautiful promise for all those who are worn out from the go, 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 and do obligations that have been put upon them because of religious tradition and teachings. Allow me to pose a question. Under what circumstance do we ever see the immovable move? When we tie God's promises to faith and then add, and I put this in quotation marks, the good works of established religion and tradition. Does the traditions and teachings of man make God's promise more powerful? Is that even possible? Is it possible through man's effort to make God's promise more powerful? The answer is no. All the doings, all the plans, all the programs, and the rules that traditions and teachings have established often make seeing the promises of God more challenging. It can be like looking at the landscape through a thick fog. That is why it is so important to follow the instruction of call. He says, call out to me. Or like the last verse where He said, come to me. It doesn't say go to the pastor or to the bishop. It says, call to me, come to me. I feel certain that many teachings and traditions have quote unquote guiding precepts for the following topics. But God's authorized way of handling challenges is His promise. His promise tied and anchored securely to your faith. That's God's way of getting things done here on the earth and in your life. Those are the tools, the promises and the faith. And that is the protocol, the application, the faith of the promise, and standing firm in that faith. Let's look at some promises together and consider how God handles the situation or the circumstance. The first one is the brokenhearted. Psalm 147 verse 3 says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Isaiah 61:3 says, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that He may be glorified. In these verses, it is unspoken, unwritten, but the one with the broken heart calls out to God, and the God of promise will answer. God's promise tied to the faith, as in Psalms, the result is that wounds are bound and the broken heart is healed. In Isaiah, when the individual calls out to God, there is a trade that happens. The trade is that beauty is given for ashes, joy is given for mourning, praises for heaviness, and all of this work, and in all cases, the work is for the glory of God. In every case and in every situation, the end result, the answer supplied by God, is so that you will glorify God. Another challenge that God addresses by His promises is that God provides. Psalm 23:1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay, by now we know what the first thing is. There is a call to the Lord. But in this case, it is also the understanding of the Lord's position. He assumes the responsibility for us. He's a shepherd. A shepherd ensures that his sheep have food, water, and shelter, and protection from predators. He does this by leading and guiding his sheep. Notice this picture is about sheep. Sheep can be led, not goats. Goats have to be herded, which is like being chased or driven to move. So in allowing God to lead us, we encounter His shepherd nature. We encounter that He provides for us food, water, shelter, and protection. We also see in this verse the phrase, I shall not want. This is a phrase that is tied to need. It is not about your laundry list or my laundry list of things I desire. We could trade the sentences out. We could put this sentence in place of the I shall not want. We could say, I have no immediate need. We could say, the Lord is my shepherd. I have no immediate need. I require nothing. And that is a promise there. That is His promise of His provision for us. Another promise is that God will never leave us. Hebrews 13:6 says, so that we confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. What will man do to me? Well, this promise is pretty straightforward. We say and believe, the Lord is my helper, I will not be afraid. This is a choice. I will choose to give no man any consideration concerning my life, my health, my substance. I will not give him any consideration over any part of my well-being. Because the Lord is my helper, man has nothing in it. He cannot do anything for me, only the Lord. Another promise is about salvation. Did you ever think about salvation as being a promise? Well, it is. And in that, you can have confidence in your standing with God through Jesus. Romans 10:13 says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." Anyone who calls on the name of the Lord. If someone doesn't call, they have to call. They have to go and put that call on the Lord so they can be saved. Another promise is with wisdom. James 1:5. "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." Well, here is the same pattern. The call or the ask. God does not just dole out wisdom. You must ask. When you ask, He will give. But it is because you've asked that He gives wisdom. Peace is in Job 22:21. "Agree with God and be at peace, thereby good will come to you." When I read this verse, I thought it was so interesting. Agree with God. Don't wrestle with Him. Don't fuss at Him. Don't try to change His mind. Agree with Him and be at peace. When He goes to correct you, submit to that correction. When He puts in your heart that you need to repent and change, to be transformed, then do so. And here's the result of that agreeing with God. Two things happen. Be at peace, and good will come to you. Our faith is anchored in the fact that God cannot lie, and that His promises are unshakable. These are God's authorized tools. We use them by faith. And these tools, used by faith, the promises of God, become His authorized protocol. Recently, I had knee surgery, and the first 2 to 3 weeks were really wonderful. I was doing very well. The Lord had blessed me. And then suddenly I couldn't sleep. And I said to the Lord, "Lord, you give sleep to your beloved, and I know you love me, so I expect to sleep." I went to bed that night. That's what I said before I laid my head on the pillow. Guess what happened? Nothing. I was up all night. I can tell you, I watched late night TV at 2 o'clock in the morning. The next day, same thing. I went and I said, "Lord, you give sleep to your beloved." And I believe, I have faith. And guess what? Nothing happened. The next day I got up and I was like, "Lord, what's going on?" And He dropped in my heart the word medication. I did a little research and found out that one of the medications, the side effect of that medication, is that sleeplessness. It will not allow you to sleep. I stopped that medication. And then I went back to the Lord and I said, "Now, Lord, remember you love me and you're going to give me sleep." And He did. I tell you that story because I don't want you to toss out the promise or to throw away your faith if something doesn't happen quite as quickly or the way you think it should. If you think there is a problem, an obstacle, ask. Because remember, if you ask, He will answer you. And He will let you know, hey, everything's great. Just keep standing. Or this correction needs to be made. Or that correction needs to be made. Do not toss out your faith. Do not throw away the promise. For they are the authorized tools that God uses. They are the authorized protocol that God uses to bring about His will on the earth. There are over 8,000 promises in the Bible. When the immovable is before you, ask. Ask for His word. Ask for His will. Ask for His promise concerning the situation. Latch on to that promise and don't let it go. Speak it, meditate on it, and remind God of His promise. Brothers and sisters, I hope this has been an encouragement to you. God's promise anchored in your faith moves the immovable. It is God's authorized protocol. They are God's authorized tools to bring about His will on the earth. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to the prophetic voice of our time. We really hope you were blessed by today's episode. And if you were, we want to hear from you. You can call us at 210-695-1630. Or you can email us at sogmi@outlook.com. That's SOGMI@outlook.com. And we really encourage you to visit our website, sogmi.org. That is SOGMI.org. That's where you can listen to previous episodes of this podcast and even support this podcast. We're supported by listeners just like you. So if you want to support this ministry, you can go to SOGMI.org and hit the donate button. You can also send a check to P.O. Box 1579, Helotes, Texas 78023. Again, that is P.O. Box 1579, Helotes, Texas 78023.